In this module, we are going to learn about how organisms are able to adapt to their environment. Adaptation. Adaptation is a morphological, it can be a physiological and behavioral attribute that enables an organism to survive and reproduce in its habitat. So, without adaptation, that organism won't be able to survive and reproduce in its environment. So it is either a morphological attribute, it's a physiological attribute, or it is a behavioral attribute. Many adaptations have evolved over a period of evolution and are genetically fixed. It has been selected by nature. Now let's learn how the kangaroo rat, which is found in deserts, that is the North American desert, is able to adjust or adapt to its external hot environment, xerophytic environment. We know deserts, they lack water or very less water availability is present. And such kangaroo rat, if there is no external source of water, they have to find an internal source of water within their body. They start to produce water within their body. And how is it done? By fat oxidation. Internal fat oxidation takes place, and when this fat is undergoing oxidation, water is produced as a byproduct, and they may make use of that water when there is no external source of water. And also, they adapt to less water availability by concentrating the urine, so that minimal volume of water is used to remove the excretory products. So these are the ways by which the kangaroo rat adapts to the desert conditions. Adaptations of desert plants. We know they have certain adaptations. Cactus, they have presence of thick cuticle on the leaf surface so as to minimize water loss. They have sunken stomata, which prevents, we know stomata or organs are tiny pores through which transpiration or loss of water in the form of water vapor takes place. So when the stomata is sunken, it prevents water loss through transpiration. And they adapt to CAM pathway, that is crassulacean acid metabolism photosynthetic pathway, which enables their stomata to remain closed during daytime. We have learned last year of C3 and C4 pathway. This is another pathway called as CAM pathway, in which the stomata remains closed during daytime. And desert plants like opuntia, they have no leaves. That means the leaves are modified to form spines, and photosynthesis is done by this expanded part, flattened part of the stem, which is a modified stem called as the phylloclad. So these are the adaptations of desert plants, that is thick cuticle, sunken stomata, CAM pathway, and leaves reduced to spines, and photosynthesis is done by the swollen stems. Adaptations of mammals. Mammals in the colder regions, they have shorter ears and limbs to reduce heat loss. In order to reduce heat loss, we learned that production of heat is a highly energetic process. So in order to prevent this heat loss or to prevent the loss of energy, they have short ears and limbs. And this rule is called as Allen's rule. That is, animals in colder regions, they have shorter ears and limbs to prevent heat loss. And aquatic mammals like seal, they have a thick layer of fat beneath their skin, and this is called as blubber. So blubber beneath the skin, it acts as an insulator and reduce loss of body heat. And this is how the animals like mammals, they are able to adapt to colder regions by Allen's rule and the presence of blubber. Physiological and biochemical adaptations of certain organisms. We know archaebacteria, the primitive bacteria, which are seen in extremely hostile conditions. They are thermoacidophils, which are seen in very hot springs and deep sea hydrothermal vents where the temperature is greater than 100 degrees Celsius. So they are able to adapt by certain physiological adaptations and biochemical adaptations. Many fish, they thrive in Antarctic waters, that is where the temperature is below 0 degrees Celsius. And many marine invertebrates and fishes, they live in great depths in the ocean where the pressure is 100 times than the normal atmospheric pressure. So all these survival is taking place in high pressure, in high temperature, in low temperature because of the physiological and biochemical adaptations. At a very higher altitude, just imagine when we are going at higher altitudes from the plains to the higher altitudes, that is greater than 3,500 meters above the sea level. What happens? We start to feel altitude sickness, that is, we start to feel giddy, we start to vomit, nausea. All this is occurring in our body. Its symptoms are nausea, heart palpitations, and fatigue, and this is due to the low atmospheric pressure. At higher altitudes, the atmospheric pressure is low, and that is why we are developing certain sicknesses that's called as altitude sickness with the following symptoms. Why such symptoms are developed? It is due to the less oxygen availability it, to our body. Our body does not get enough oxygen. Gradually, when we stay there for a bit more long time, we acclimatize the situation, and our body will start to compensate the low oxygen availability by increasing the RBC and breathing rate and decreasing the binding capacity of hemoglobin. By decreasing the binding capacity of the hemoglobin with oxygen and increasing the RBCs, increasing the RBC and the breathing rate, the low availability of oxygen is compensated, and thus we are able to acclimatize to the situation of altitude sickness. This is about the physiological and biochemical adaptations which we experience when we go to higher altitudes. Next is about the behavioral adaptations which is shown by certain animals. The desert lizards, what do? They bask in the sun and they observe, you can see they bask in the sun and they absorb heat when the body temperature is very low. When the body temperature goes low, they bask in the sun and absorb heat. But what do? When the temperature is very high, they start to move into shades when the ambience temperature, then the surrounding temperature starts to increase. And some species, what do? They burrow inside the soil to escape from the intense heat and escape from the above ground heat. So these are certain behavioral adaptations which is shown, that is basking in the sun, moving to the shade, and burrowing in the soil. So these are the adaptations shown by different organisms in order to adapt to the environment. It can be either physiological, biochemical, or it can be behavioral attribute. Thank you.